Good evening, my friends, and welcome to this session of our Triduum, 3 days of reflection on Ignatian spirituality in preparation for the feast of Saint Ignatius. We know that Saint Ignatius himself had a very deep experience, and this year we are celebrating the 500th anniversary of what we call the cannonball moment in the life of Saint Ignatius. The time when that experience, after which he changed his life dramatically. And his life then has had an impact on the world ever since, all these 500 years. We thought the best way to understand Ignatian spirituality is to look at it in the life of a Jesuit. And who better these days than to reflect on the life of Father Stan Swamy. Father Stan himself had a cannonball moment in his life which changed him and which made him do things that we are now very well aware of because they had consequences. So Father Stan is someone whom we think is a good example of Ignatian spirituality and its impact on our lives. We might think that Stan is someone extraordinary, but I'd like to present him here as he was. He himself claimed to be absolutely ordinary, and yet there was something special. Stan was like any other Jesuit. He went through Jesuit formation. He even went abroad for studies. He became an academic, an academician, and he ended up in Bangalore in our center, the Jesuit center called the Indian Social Institute, where he became the director. And for 10 long years, he was the director of that institute. I happened to go for a course there as a young Jesuit, and there was Father Stan, the first time I met him. And he gave us a course in social analysis. And that's where I got captivated by understanding the idea of the need to understand society better. But I'm not here to talk about Father Stan because I went for a course many years ago under him. I'm here because I was the court-appointed guardian for Father Stan while he was in a hospital close by, Holy Family Hospital. And I interacted with him. In fact, I was the only one allowed to interact with him because he was in judicial custody. I interacted with him for a whole month, almost every evening, spending about 45 minutes to an hour, talking to him and dialoguing on different issues. And that's why I got to know him better. But I'd like to present Father Stan, therefore, as someone like any one of us, and yet the impact that Ignatian spirituality had on him made him take choices which perhaps most of us would not, because they were very risky choices. So let me present him first as an academician. After we have a few slides which will show him like any one of us. So we have the first slide showing him giving a talk. And after his stint at the Indian Social Institute, he did what he was motivating all the students who came to his institute to do. And that was do grassroots work. So after finishing his tenure, he decided to do the grassroots work in Jharkhand among the tribals. There you see him in another seminar or a talk in which he is talking about his knowledge of tribals and their needs their rights. He is conscientizing them about what they need to do to stand up for their rights. The next slide will give you again another occasion in which Father Stan is addressing people. He's giving a talk like so many of us do. The next slide will give you a silhouette of Stan once again teaching. And he had a lot to teach because he did very good scholarship. He understood what was happening in India, in the political system, in the system in which the Adivasis function. Here you see him in a type of a seminar, once again talking about his idea or the conclusions he has reached in social analysis. And then we come to another slide in which we see him in his own institute, the institute he ran for the last few years, Bagaicha. And here you see an outdoor session, a type of meeting with people and conscientizing them and planning common action. Here there is a rather larger group of people who had come to Bagaicha to understand what they can do to work for their rights, tribal rights. And so you see, Father Stan was an academician, but he did not only remain in the classroom. He also joined the people in the streets. And here you have Father Stan, and behind him also a very well-known academician. We have the sociologist Jardres, who also is working for similar human rights, tribal rights. They are ready to join in solidarity with the tribals. Here you see them in another, you see Father Stan in another locale where a group of tribals have got together to try to understand what they can do about their condition. The next slide will tell you that Father Stan could not be silenced already then. He was ready to speak. We'll have another slide which tells you that. He was ready to speak from the rooftops, so to say, and the media caught what he was saying. And we come to then finally a picture of Father Stan. This is the man. You can see like any one of us. And so, what is the cannonball moment in his life? This is what we need to reflect on. What is it that changed Father Stan Swamy so that he became someone who was of great use to the tribals in Jharkhand? Instead of listening to me talking about what Father Stan did and what he was all about, the best would be to listen to Stan himself. And we have the interview of Father Stan by Tapan Bose. We are grateful to this eminent journalist, Mr. Tapan Bose, who allowed us to play this interview that he had with him some years ago, a few years ago. And Stan himself very candidly gives us a social analysis and tells us what the lot of the tribals is and what we can do about it. And that's when he speaks about the cannonball moment in his life. See if you can decipher that. At the end of the video, perhaps I will ask you, which of those incidents is the cannonball moment? This is a video of about 20 minutes, but you will find Father Stan explaining lucidly what is it that motivates him. We watch Stan's...
the long interview I recorded nearly 2.5 years ago at Bagaicha will give us an understanding of what kind of a man he was, what commitment, deep commitment he had for the Adivasi.
Tapan, my observations will be, or reflections will be, not on specific movement, this and that and so on, but the flow of movements that have taken place. First of all, what is a movement, a people's movement? That means people are involved there. People who are affected by a particular issue or a situation, and they feel they need to do something about it, and they come together. And in the process of coming together, a natural leadership from among them emerges. And the importance of a collective leadership is important in a people's movement. This is how I have understood it. If you put that in with regard to Jharkhand movements, we have had several movements, whole series of movements. We have had towering personalities, beginning with the Birsa Munda, let alone Tilka Manjhi and others in the 20th century. Birsa Munda was there and wanted to lead a revolution against the British on the one hand and the very oppressive zamindari system that was there. And we cannot think of a more militant person than Birsa Munda. But at the end of it all, he did not really succeed in creating a movement. Birsa Munda was there, and they worshipped him. They even made him a Bhagwan, whereas we should be calling him a Veer, a hero, and not a Bhagwan. That's what the ruling class is making him to be. The moment you elevate somebody into the supernatural sphere, then he is no more with us. So, we have had very towering personalities like him. And later in history, we have had persons like Ramdayal Munda, a person not just son of the soil, but who vibrated with the life of his people, the culture, the social traditions of his people. And he also wanted to see that something could emerge in terms of a people's movement that would go on with him or without him. But that also did not succeed. And then he also tried at the politics level, or parliamentary democratic politics, wanted to stand in elections, and it was a failure. So all these things point out to the fact that despite the fact that we have had very powerful, charismatic leaders all through history, real Jharkhandi people's movement has not really taken roots to the extent it would pave its own way towards a greater assertion of its rights. And so there we are. We have had so many movements, and yet it looks we have had no movements. That is the situation today. Even today there are some leaders. Some of them are more genuine, others not so genuine. And this is where the impact of so-called parliamentary democracy comes, the election comes, where money plays a big role. So the impact has had, and so Jharkhandi leaders who have become MPs and MLAs, most of them have couldn't care less what is happening to their people. It is power and money and position. So it has engulfed the whole process.
Where do you think is the main source of the weakness? Is it because the movement also remained trapped in very limited objectives, like either get a state or get some rights on land and so on and so forth, and did not think in terms of the how to deal with or examine the nature of the Indian state with which it was fighting, and So where was this disconnect? Because it seems to have been completely co-opted by the Indian state. So there was, and where was the weakness in the movement?
The weakness, you see, first we have on the part of the Adivasi society a beautiful culture of our people, self-sustaining economy, and a self-governance based on their own traditional leadership. That was there. But then when the capitalist economy comes in, and where now private ownership becomes a primary thing, and if it is primary private ownership, then you have to make money and make more money. So the impact of the market comes in, capitalist market, for which people are not ready, were not ready, and even now they are not ready if you go into rural areas. But that has been imposed on a people. And this has weakened a people as a people. So in terms of the value system, maybe some elders in the interior villages, they may still carry on that same value with attitude towards the ancestors who are with them. Like Ram Dayal Munda would say, when you are physically dead, you are not dead and gone. You are dead, but you are with us. That type of a spirit is not there. So, the impact of a so-called modern economy, which is capitalist economy, has been absolutely devastative with regard to the Adivasi system. And I'm sure you are aware of the very cherished values that the Adivasi people have lived by. They all have kind of watered down. And once your value system is watered down, then what type of a movement can you give birth to? Then it is again geared towards gaining power. And in a so-called democratic, parliamentary democracy, you have to win elections and come to power. And once you come to power, you enter into another scale of values. So finally, there is hardly anything left of the Adivasiness, and it is superseded by the so-called modern society. So as such, the movements have not really been persistent in preserving the values and helping a people to struggle for their rights based on those values. I don't see it anymore.
So it is basically what we are seeing is a clash of, in a way, between two value systems. It's a clash of two kind of systems of economy: capitalism, the capitalist state, and versus the collectivist, ecology-based culture of the Adivasi. There is also a feeling at times one gets is that the Indian state actually looks upon the Adivasis as a colony, as an internal colony, and that is also a part of its total, the private property-based culture of capitalism. You've been experiencing, this over so many years. How do you see? I mean, is it? How does it manifest? I mean, in your opinion, the attitude of the Indian state, which towards the Adivasis?
May I illustrate this with one example that kind of had a big impact on me. I was a very young person as the information as a Jesuit. I was teaching in a Hindi medium school in the tribal area in Chaipasa, Lupungutu. I used to spend my holidays with my students. I was also a hostel prefect. So with my students, I would go spend the holidays in their, living in their house and accepting their hospitality. Then I started to understand the cherished values of the Adivasi society. One morning, it was a summer time, we got up, went to the river, did our ablutions, came back, we sat on the pinda on the house with my young students. Then the father of the house, he had also gone to the river, he came back. There was a big mango tree in their yard and it was mango season. So he looked up the tree and he called his son. He said, "Son, go up the tree, that branch, bring down the fruits." So he went up, brought down the fruits, nice ripe mangoes. So he gave us, we all ate. But there was one branch where there were some nice fruits. He did not ask his son to bring those fruits. I thought he did not notice. So I picked up courage and told him, look at that branch. He casually looked at it and he said, "Oh, they are for the birds of the air. Those fruits are for the birds of the air." So nature has what has given us freely. We share with nature. This kind of, I kind of performed a somersault in terms of my value system. That it can be like this. You share what nature has given you with nature. So deliberately you leave one whole branch for birds of the air. So I can cite many such examples. Then back to the school. Tuesday used to be the market day in Chaibasa. All the villages around would come there. I would go with my boys to the market just to see. As we entered, Chaibasa has 4 or 5 entries. And Adivasis from the villages, they would bring something or other to the bazaar. It is also a social get-together, you are aware. Especially Adivasi women may not come empty-handed to the bazaar. They have to bring something, either some eggs or sabji or a chicken or a goat. You sell it and then buy what you need and go. I saw more than once Adivasi woman having a chicken under her arm. She would come towards the market. But before she would enter Chaibasa town, the dalals of the merchants, petty merchants, he would come and snatch the chicken from her. She would shout and yell, "Kanya, kanya." That means, "I don't want to give, I don't want to give." But it will be taken. And then he'll throw a dirty 5 rupee note at her like that. He wouldn't even give her in his hand. At that time, her chicken would be worth 20-25 rupees. She was given 5 rupees, a dirty note thrown at her. Then I said, "By God, what is happening? Here are people who cherish their values and sharing things with nature. And here is another value system which just exploits them and deprives them of our human dignity, human respect." So once I saw this, then I used to ask my boys who were with me, I said, "You see what is happening?" They say, "Haan, father, dekhte hain." But don't we do something about it? Kya kar sakte hain? It is at that juncture I said, I want to make something of my life for these people. What exactly that something would be, I did not know. I was very young. Afterwards, I had to go through many other years of Jesuit formation and so on. But finally, I stuck on to that dream. And the dream is still there with me. With all that has happened, with all that has gone through a center like Bagaita, we are trying to get people who are in struggle, struggling for their rights. We try to be in touch with them, bring them here, help them to understand without calling it socio-political analysis or a Marxian methods of analysis. We try to equip them to understand what is happening, why are things happening like this happening, who is responsible for this, and then develop certain strategies of action through which they can go back to their people, not with project, with money, but just as human beings to be able to say, let us come, let us resist anything that is unjust that is being done to us. Tapan, one thing that has happened in Jharkhand with regard to displacement in the past 2 decades, it has not happened in the neighboring states of Chhattisgarh or Orissa. It has happened in Jharkhand because people like us, Meghnad and Sanjay and several other colleagues, what we did was people started to resist unjust displacement. So we tried to bring them together. We have succeeded, at least partially. We have brought together 60 to 70 groups who are resisting displacement in their own places under some umbrella organizations, 2 or 3 such organizations. And and express some mutual solidarity to each other. If you receive a notification saying that you have to vacate your village in the next 2 months, you will inform us. And all of us will come on a particular day you appoint and stand shoulder to shoulder with you and say, we will not move. So, jaan denge, zameen nahi denge is not an empty word. So, I myself have gone to several such situations, some of them of a very precarious nature. We were surrounded by armed police surrounding us, but things have to be done. So this type of a resistance to unjust displacement and the land alienation has taken place and is going on even now. This is an achievement of the people which you and I must recognize.
So that is something unique, because unfortunately the Jharkhand state, which was a state for the Adivasis, is in fact turned out to be very, very unsympathetic to the whole Adivasi issue, and is more interested in getting foreign investment and selling out the land of the Adivasi. So this resistance is a great news.
So whether it is, we have had, I think, 6 or 7 Adivasi chief ministers during these 15 years, and for once we have a non-Adivasi as the chief minister. Let that be. Whether it was an Adivasi or a non-Adivasi who have been on the realm of governance, they all have been sold to this capitalist system, where you think the more investment you get, the so-called development takes place. So they are being carried away, and in the process, is also to see how much money I can make in the process. So the whole game is there, is going on. Now, the way, what can, or maybe we hope what should happen, is people are coming to a process of being disillusioned about their own so-called leadership, about the so-called political setup, so-called government, so-called local prashasan, the administration, the police. People are beginning to see them through and through for what they are. And the resistance will continue. And that's where the challenge for activists like us is, in what way, using whatever talent or whatever things we have, we can support such resistance movements, so that people as people, not looking up to big leaders, MP or MLA or this or that person, but counting on their own strength, and be ready to pay the cost. Because of this effort, consistent resistance to to displacement and land alienation, 104 MOUs were signed by Jharkhand state with as many companies, but only about half a dozen of them have been able to open shop in Jharkhand, the big companies. And how did they do that? Either by cheating the people or by frightening them. threatening them. So, and people are beginning to see that through.
So the resistance has been quite successful in keeping the big companies out.
Yeah. Yes. Now, the resistance cannot be in a negative way. You are coming to take our land, so I am resisting. It is still a negative type of reaction. Now people have to take one step further. That is where, like the 2013 Supreme Court judgment very briefly stated, the owner of the land is also the owner of the mineral, of the subsoil mineral in his land, which I think is a significant thing. So people have to assert themselves and say, it's not just we will not give our land and then be displaced, but we are going to take the riches that is in our land. This process has started in a very minuscule way, but we have to encourage to see that this kind of spreads like fire. These days, wherever I go, I take the Supreme Court judgment, I made it into a summary of a 2-page, just the basic points, and translated it into Hindi. I carry with me and I show them, look, here is a judgment. There is koila or loha or whatever it is, you assert your ownership. If anybody raises a question, show him the Supreme Court judgment. So, in some places, especially in Hazaribagh, in Karanpura area, which is a rich agricultural land, but it is also the subsoil coal. So NTPC is after that, and the government wants to give it, but people are resisting. They are not giving. So it is not just resisting giving land to a company, but to say this land is ours, and whatever riches there is, it is also ours, and we have a right. So people, Gram Sabhas have to do it. It cannot be done by individuals. Gram Sabha, again, based on the traditional leadership, the Munda Manki system. This is one way of reviving it. You see, the traditional system cannot be revived in the abstract. It can only be revived based on concrete achievement that is possible. Here is a possible situation. Like Sanjay and others, our friends are trying to help them to see their rights over the forest. It's not just because the government passed a law in 2006, so-called Forest Rights Act, that people have the rights. No, people have had the right all along. But now finally some recognition has come about. Okay, that's good. So we are not dependent on what laws the government will pass or will not pass, but go back to our roots, our traditions, and say this is how we related to nature, this is how we owned nature, not so much as individuals, but as a community. And we go back to that. So several Gram Sabhas have started to do that. In some places the local administration objected, so they showed the Supreme Court judgment. And those fellows had not even heard of such a judgment or seen that judgment. So it is going on. This type of effort, if it becomes part of people's movement without wanting it to become a global movement, a movement that it takes in the whole of Jharkhand. But wherever people are, if they can start this type of a movement, asserting their right, nature-given rights, which is a predominant right over any other right given by any law or by any government or a court, based on their rights, if they can proceed, that I see as the only possibility by which our people can live as a people.
My friends, we have been privileged to listen to Stan describing about the discernment process he himself went through. His scholarship, his understanding of the Indian society, tribal society, and the experiences he had. All that led him to discern what is God saying to him. What does God want of his life? And you saw him saying, that's my dream. I still have that dream. And he had it till the end. Now my friends, my question to you is, what was that moment which we could consider to be the cannonball moment in his life? What do you think from all that he spoke? I think you will agree that it was his experiences in Chaibasa with the students and with human society there, tribal and non-tribal. And when he saw what was happening to the tribals, that was the cannonball experience that changed him. Of course, from there on, he went on to other Jesuit formation. He continued in academics for a while. And then when it was possible, he came back to Jharkhand and started work among the Jharkhandis, among the tribals. And Bagaicha is the fruit of that work. He didn't do it alone. He joined with so many different organizations. He mentioned a few names. And together with the conscientization of the tribals, they got success. They succeeded in protecting the rights of the tribals in the state of Jharkhand. To some extent at least. It was success that brought him in the, you could say, the sights of the government. And now we'll listen to a very short 3-minute video recorded by Father Stan just 2 days before his arrest.
In the context of Jharkhand becoming a separate state, and so everybody wanted it as state, but then the issues were there. The issues were especially displacement, land alienation because of mining, factories, townships, dams, and people were not taken into confidence. Hardly only minimal compensation was being paid to them. So we took it as a challenge and say how young people can take this as a life issue and fight it out. So in this process, some very helpful rulings or laws were passed by the Indian Parliament, and particularly one Pesa Act, which gives significant powers to the Gram Sabha, whatever happens in the village, for it to be consulted and to get its consent. The other is the Land Acquisition Act, which for the first time recognizes the need to get the consent of the people, of the landowners, and a fair compensation to them. So this kind of opened the way for us, and people started to claim their rights. But as they claimed, they were just being thrown into jail. So in 2017, I gave a call to whoever I knew, not only in Jharkhand, but in all the central tribal states of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha and Bengal. So we came together, we have formed a body called Persecuted Prisoner Solidarity Committee. And through that, we had planned to take up, first to do a study of the nature of under trial prisoners in all these states, and then to have recourse to legal action so that justice can be done. In this process, I have filed a case against the Jharkhand state in Jharkhand High Court on behalf of about 3,000 young Adivasis who are languishing in the jail. It is this which became a bone of contention with the state, and they wanted to put me out of the way. And one easy way was to implicate me in some serious cases. And this case, it so happened, the Bhima Koregaon, a place that I have never been to in all my life. I was implicated there. I was raided twice. First it was done by Pune police, then it was forcibly taken over by NIA. What is happening to me is not something unique happening to me alone. It's a broader process that is taking place all over the country. We are all aware how prominent intellectuals, lawyers, writers, poets, activists, student leaders, they are all put into jail just because they have expressed their dissent or raised questions about the ruling powers of India. So we are part of the process. As such, in a way, I am happy to be part of this process, because I'm not a silent spectator, but I'm part of it, part of the game, and ready to pay the price, whatever be it. Thank you for your attention.
That, my friends, was once again Stan Swamy explaining how he landed up in jail. And you can see he said very clearly, even in the earlier video several years ago, he's ready to pay the price. Now the price, as we know, was a direct transfer to Taloja jail. And here we find that Stan and his companions and other under trials are treated very badly. It's not just the incarceration, it's the harsh treatment meted out to especially political prisoners, but all under trials in the jail. For example, Father Stan told me that he spent all his time in the jail hospital. That was a concession given to an 83-year-old man with Parkinson's disease. And he told me that the jail, what they called a jail, was a total misnomer. There was no hospital there at all. If anyone fell ill, all that they gave was, and he said it in this way, paracetamol. That's all that they could dispense there in the hospital, so-called hospital. In other words, there was no real medical facility in the jail when people fell ill, and especially people as old as Father Stan. And so in the middle of May, when Father Stan finally fell ill after several months, he told his companion in a phone call, "I'm ill. I have a fever, I'm not feeling well at all, I have a headache, I have diarrhea, I have a sore throat." And it looked like the symptoms of COVID. But he was given paracetamol, and then later we are told he was given antibiotics. No test for COVID, the RT-PCR was not done. And then finally, because of representations, he was sent to a government hospital. He was sent in the afternoon, and by night he was back in the jail. No RT-PCR was taken, in spite of him saying that he had symptoms which anybody would infer could be COVID. Then the court was approached, and the court asked for a medical examination once again in the hospital. And he was taken there to the government hospital a second time. And just before he was taken, he was given the COVID vaccine. Now, we all know that when you're not well, you shouldn't be taking the vaccine. It looks like the jail authorities had not heard of that, or had they. However, he was taken once again to the government hospital, and there was a team that examined him, but no RT-PCR. Back to Taloja jail, until finally the court ordered that he should be taken to a private hospital. And that's how he ended up at Holy Family Hospital. My friends, you can see the harsh treatment that under trials have to bear. It's not just the incarceration. And we have many others there languishing in jail without any case being taken forward. We have Vernon Gonsalves and we have Arun Ferreira, who took care of Father Stan in the jail, and several others like Sudha Bharadwaj and other eminent authors, journalists, lawyers who are put behind bars in similar conditions. Therefore, all this, my friends, should make us think, what does God want from us? How do we respond to situations? That's what Stan did. We saw him talking to us about situations in his life which made him think and which gave him a dream. What is the cannonball experience in our lives? What is God calling us to? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves in prayer. And that's what Ignatius taught us. Ignatian spirituality tells us we have to reflect on the signs of the times, our experiences in the world, and then ask that question that Stan asked himself: what does God want from me? That, my friends, is what the National Justice Day is all about, that we are celebrating today all over the country. National Justice Day. Are we called to also add to justice, to work for justice, to campaign for justice for those who cannot speak for themselves? That's the question every one of us should ask ourselves, and under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, we should try to answer. And I'm sure God will be with us, and God will give us the type of answers that will be practical. It might require some daring. It might mean risks, like Stan realized. I asked him on one of the occasions, Stan, 2 years before you were arrested, they had already filed an FIR against you. Didn't you know that if you continued with your work, you would be behind bars sooner or later? I knew that, he said. I knew that. But that was something that I had to accept. I couldn't abandon my brothers and sisters, Adivasis. And that's the reason why we are celebrating the life of Father Stan Swamy, thanking God for him. We also reflect on our own calling, and we pray that the cannonball experiences in our lives, maybe there's not just one, be a series that will help us to decide what is God saying to us today. Thank you for your patient reflection with me, and we hope that God will lead us to a better society, a society of love and justice and peace. Good